Welcome to A Walk in the Garden. This is an episode of a gardening show that's done in my yard. I'm Liz Davey, and you're watching it on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television. Today we're starting again in my herb garden as we have all season, and the herbs are starting to wind down a little. The rain has helped a lot, but the important thing now is to use the herbs and pick them because frost will come eventually. Today is a lovely sunny day. Temperature's about 10 degrees above the normal for this season. It's late September right now, but we know that frost will come. When I first came to this garden over 40 years ago, we often had a frost early in September. This has changed, perhaps as a part of the climate change, but I've definitely noticed the difference in my garden. I used to have to be ready for frost just about Labor Day. Now it seems we have until the end of September, even early to middle October, before we have to worry about temperatures going down to 32 or below. Giving you plenty of time to finish up in the garden. It's time to pick the tender things and use them. The scented geraniums, we've taken cuttings. You can take more cuttings of those. Stevia can be taken and dried for use as a dry, sweet herb. You can make moth bundles out of some of the more pungent herbs and hang them in places that moths or mice tend to get in. They help repel them. The lemon verbena will go with the first frost, so enjoy that while you can. If you want, you can dig up some of the tender herbs for inside, and I'm going to do that with my rosemary. I have several rosemaries. One in back I try to winter over in place. But this one, I'm going to dig right out of the ground and put it into a pot. And put some of the soil that's with it. Rosemary does not like a really rich soil, and it likes good drainage. That's one reason I'm using a clay pot rather than a plastic pot for the rosemary. Clay pots tend to dry out a little faster, so we can keep this fairly dry for the winter. This is going to stay out for a while. Rosemary actually can stay out until about 20 degrees, as can my fig. After that, I'll bring them into my unheated entryway where they will spend the winter and hopefully make it. I will have to make sure that I keep this somewhat watered. Not too much and not too little. Rosemary's a hard one to winter over. Some people have all the luck in the world. I have mixed reactions with it. You can also take some cuttings and try to grow them inside. But this one I'm going to just bring into my front entry. Now let's move around to the perennial garden. The perennial garden is starting to bloom with the fall perennials. This one is Boltonia. It comes in pink or white. It tends to look a lot like asters, but it is quite a hardy plant, and it blooms with a flower like an aster. They are in the same family. Again, the pink variety is a little bit shorter. I like the white one. It adds a lot of color to the garden by adding white amidst all the green. This one has darker foliage all season. The foliage has turned a little brighter at this point, and it's about ready to flower. This is Eupatorium chocolate, and it will have a white blossom. Right now the buds are kind of a pinkish purple. The butterfly weed is still growing strong, and it will continue right up until frost as long as I take off the old blooms. And you can see where to do that. Just take them off. And if you see a new bud down below them, leave it. It tends to grow very much like salvia. And if you've deadheaded salvia, you can definitely do this one. But as long as you keep it deadheaded, it will keep blooming right up until fall. This is one the butterflies love, the hummingbirds love it, and it also adds a lot of color. It too comes in different shades of purple and also in pink, and sometimes white as well. There are also dwarf versions of it if you're looking for something for a sunny foundation planting. There's a white version that's only about 2.5 feet tall, that's generally covered with white blossoms, and again, often covered with butterflies. Now I'm going to move over to the other side. Sometimes the season's best roses occur in early fall, early to mid-fall. That's because most of the pests are now gone and the temperatures are a little bit cooler. This rose is a knockout rose, and it happens to be covered with buds right now. We've got a few blossoms, but we will have quite a few more as long as the weather stays the way it is. I don't prune my roses until spring. Just leave all the blossoms on and it'll stay all winter. I have lemon verbena, and of course now is the season for sedum. And this is a sedum autumn joy. It's covered with honeybees right now, which is a wonderful sign because someone must have a hive in the area. Not only is it good for bees, it's also very nice to look at. It generally stands up pretty straight. And these blossoms start out as a pale pink. They gradually turn darker, and by the time the season's over, they will be a dark mahogany. I will leave them on the plant most of the fall, and then I can cut them and use them in winter arrangements. As a dried flower, they maintain that mahogany color, and they're really quite attractive. I have a darker one that I've just started down here that has a darker leaf. It'll also have a pink flower eventually. Right now it's just a new plant, which I'll keep watered until the end of the season, and hopefully by next year we'll have a little larger plant here. Chrysanthemums are another plant that's in full bloom right now. These are the ones that we cut back earlier, and I have them all along the way. This is a salvia black and blue. It is unfortunately hardy a bit further south of here, but it is not hardy in our area. I'm going to keep it deadheaded or trimmed back when the blossoms fade, and hopefully it will last a while into fall, giving us some blue color that is a little hard to come by in the fall. I may also take some cuttings of this one and see if I can keep it going inside. It just needs it a little bit warmer than we have it. Both the lemongrass and the pineapple sage are herbs that are very tender, and they will either be dug up or left to frost. Cuttings can be made of the pineapple verbena. I will probably dig the lemongrass. It does fairly well inside, at least it stays alive. This one was inside all last winter, came out and is about twice as big as it was last year. So I will probably again bring that one inside. I've tried cutting it back inside, and it was not too happy about that, so I think I'll probably leave it the way it is and put it in a large pot inside, if I have space for it. The pineapple sage is a lovely plant. It just has a wonderful aroma if you brush your hands over the leaves. Unfortunately, the aroma and flavor don't go together, especially if it's cooked, so you need to use it raw, perhaps in a fruit salad or with a dish of fruit. And it does have a lovely, lovely pineapple odor and a bit of pineapple flavor as well. Down this way, we have some things that need to be deadheaded. This is a rose or a lavender, and instead of cutting the whole plant back this fall, I will just cut off all of the spent blooms. It will make it look a little neater, and it will give it a fresher start next fall. I cover my lavenders, which we'll do later on. This is yarrow. It was a pink yarrow. There's still a few little blooms on it, but the majority of it has already gone to seed. So I'm going to take those all the way down to the base of the plant, cut them off, compost them. I'll leave the few short ones that are there. But these we'll just put in the compost, and then the plant support that's been holding it up all summer will also be put away for the winter. Many of the flowering tobaccos have also passed their bloom season, and those can just be pulled out and added to the compost. This gives you more space to enjoy the lovely sedum that's down behind this one. The phlox can also be deadheaded at this time to keep it from going to seed and spreading all over the place, which it is very likely to do. The cleome will come out as soon as it's finished blooming, and I think a few of these are finished. Again, it likes to set seed, so we can just pull those and add them to the compost pile as well. That will leave us an area in here, and if you want to put in another chrysanthemum, planning on it being just an annual plant, you could do that now. Or you can leave the space for planting fall herbs next month. Moving down this way, again, we have more chrysanthemums and sedum and asters. This one is purple dome. I also have a pink dome. Many of the asters are quite tall. I prefer the ones that are a little bit shorter. I also have a couple pepper plants in here. These are hot peppers, and they're edible hot peppers. And this one is making some lovely red fruits, which I'm sure are hot as the dickens. But we can use those, but they also add some color to the garden. Right now, grasses, if you have different grasses in your flower beds, they're kind of coming into their bloom cycle. This one is Cheyenne Sun. It's a shorter grass. Many of the grasses are really tall. I've had a couple tall ones. I've taken them out because they were overpowering. And this is a lower sedum. Sedum comes in different sizes, from very tiny. This is a small pink one, which will be in bloom soon in this area. The nepeta is still blooming. It is one of the longest blooming plants as a perennial. And this will bloom right up until and even after a light frost. I deadheaded the platycodons this year, and you can see their bright blue blooms are coming back again, right on through the rose foliage. So we do have some color in the fall garden, and some nice weather to enjoy it. Now it's time to go into the vegetable garden. In the vegetable garden, I've pulled up as many onions as I could find. We have a few that we started from sets this spring. I also have some onions that I started from seed, and those are fairly small, but I've been picking those and using them regularly. And I also have green onions, which are down that were planted from seed, and those are supposedly perpetual onions, so they should come back next year. I'm not sure how that works, but we shall see. I am thinning them and using them as I go. The onions that I picked, I've left out on the straw to do what they call field cure. They will stay out in the sun, and I'll leave them out here for probably the next week because rain isn't predicted, at which point I will bring out a net bag, one that I've saved from onions that I purchased, and I'll pack the onions in the bag and then store them in a cool, dry place until they've been used. They should last. Some of them will probably last into the spring. However, I think I'll probably use them all up before then. We still have a little cilantro. It's in blossom, but I've still been able to use it. I have a few that we seeded a couple weeks ago that are up and growing, and I can use that. I still have some lettuce and arugula for salads and radishes to add to that salad. The beans that we planted are now in blossom, and as long as the frost holds off for another couple weeks, we'll have fresh green beans to use. I also have plenty of flowers over here for making bouquets to bring in. The more you pick, the more they blossom, at least for zinnias. They also have attracted a number of different butterflies. I've seen black swallowtails, the tiger swallowtails, which are yellow, one monarch, and numerous fritillaries, which are looks a little bit like a monarch, but they are not. And a lot of small skippers and other small butterflies. Zinnias are really a good attractant for butterflies. Moving over through the strawberries, I have some more arugula, And beets, I've been starting to pick the beets. The parasacaba, which is the broccoli relative that you can saute, has a lot of small pieces, and I've been picking those up 2 or 3 times a week and then sauteing them with a little garlic maybe, or onion or other vegetables. They're very good with summer squash. It's kind of a mixed dish. We've also gotten a few other heads of regular broccoli. Plenty of kale. We're going to be using some kale today in what we're making. Also carrots, and I'm starting to pick those. Some nice carrots and beets in this area. Also the perpetual spinach. I could use that in the recipe I'm making today instead of the kale, but I decided to use the kale because we have so much of it. The spinach can be used at any time. I tend to take the midribs out. This is a perpetual spinach, which is actually a beet relative, but it's much, much more tender and succulent and less sharp in taste than regular beet foliage is. The Brussels sprouts are over here, and I've already cut the center growing stem out of them. This supposedly will force them to make the Brussels sprouts, which are on the stem. Unfortunately, with our dry summer, I'm not getting many sprouts yet. We'll see how the temperature holds and whether we get some sprouts or not. Some years they work out beautifully, some years they do not. It's always worth planting a few because we do like them, but not sure whether we'll get as many sprouts as we'd like. We'll keep track of them and see. They will last through a frost, as will the parsnips and the kale. And the broccoli. We can continue using those things until a hard freeze. Other things will need to be pulled up, like these beans. I planted a variety of beans this year, and these, you'll see the bean pods were not picked, and these are beans that are for drying. And I did 3 different kinds of dry beans that can be saved for the winter. Just a few of each. And these are cannellini beans, which are the white kidney beans. And they've done really well. I wasn't sure if our season would be long enough or dry enough, but it has been, definitely. So I'm shelling these out, and I have a bowl down here. And what I'll do is just pick the plants and then pick off the pods and shell them into the bowl. Once I've got them shelled, I'll take them inside and let them dry a little further. Sort them out, take out any bad ones, and then I will pasteurize them in the oven before I store them. I tend to store them in the freezer anyway in case there is a little bit of moisture left in them so they won't spoil. But these pods are pretty dry for the cannellini beans. They shell out quite easily. And then the foliage will go into the compost. When you're composting spent plants, try not to compost any that are diseased because that can spread around a disease for the next year. The other ones that I planted are black beans. We like black beans, so I thought I'd try planting those. And they've done really quite well. And again, I'm going to shell those out. When I get serious about this, I'll have a separate bowl for each. And you can see they go pretty fast. And once the whole row is done, why, I'll have my beans ready to finish drying for the summer, or for the winter. Sorry, it's the summer temperatures today. I'm getting some eggplant and also peppers, celery, some more extra green beans and yellow beans, and of course some zucchini, which we'll also be using today. My straw flowers are still putting on blooms. I've been taking them in, not sure what I'll do with those yet. They're be all set for a nice winter craft project. The celery will not last past frost, so I want to make sure I get that out of here before a frost threatens. The same with the beans. They will not make it, nor will the tomatoes or peppers or basil. The basil's the first to go. It turns nice and black with the first low temperatures. So be sure you use all the basil that you have. Make some pesto to freeze. Enjoy it on the fresh tomatoes. I've already pulled 2 tomatoes out of my tomato bed, my yellow pear tomatoes, the plants browned, and I picked all the yellow tomatoes that were there, which they were finished for the season. So I've pulled those out already and disposed of the vines. There are plenty of cherry tomatoes left, plum tomatoes, and regular tomatoes, which we've been enjoying a great deal. And we'll continue to. And I will be preserving some of those. I have already, which we'll talk about once we get into the kitchen. I'm going to move over this way and show you the third bean for drying. And that one's on my fence because it's a climber. And it's in amongst the dahlias that are over here. And this is what is called a rattlesnake bean. And there are 5 or 6 in each pod. And you can see that this has a lot of speckles on it. It's a speckled bean. So there'll be 3 types. They're very easy to separate one from another because they're quite different in looks. And we'll have a little fun cooking with those come winter. We're also getting quite a few cucumbers. I've yet to make some pickles. That probably will come very soon because, again, the cucumbers will wilt very rapidly if we get a frost. Now, over to the potting bench. The cuttings that we've taken are doing pretty well. I've got a number of them here. I've got some that are out in a little sunnier location, and I can always take a few more cuttings. I got out my Forsyth pot that we've used before. This is a plastic pot with a clay pot inside. The clay pot has a cork in it. There is perlite around it, which has been soaked. I put my cuttings into that area, and then I'll put a plastic bag over it to keep the humidity in. At least that's the plan. Put everything underneath. And then we'll just let that sit here in a somewhat shaded area until they have sprouted. And it usually takes a very short time, about a week. I checked out some of my house plants. This one is a Christmas cactus that stays in all season. And as you can see, the pot is starting to split. And the plant is very top heavy. And I said, oh, I think that could use a new pot. So I will repot this one using the same soil and a larger pot. I like to put something in the bottom of the pot to keep the soil in. In this case, I used a piece of paper towel. You can use coffee filters or newspaper. And I want to bring it up to about 1 inch below the top. And then add some potting soil around it. This one lives inside on my balcony, which has a lot of morning sun, which it seems to like. Again, we'll pack the soil in around it so it's even. Be sure to give it a good drink. And probably time for another bag of potting soil. And we'll give it a good drink and leave it out here a little while and then bring it inside. It's important to remember also to water any plants that you've put in now, like chrysanthemums or flowering cabbages, or if they're in pots. And speaking of that, we're going to move over by my window box, and on the floor near that, some of the plants that I've put in just for the fall season. Window boxes at this time of the year are getting a little sparse usually. A lot of the annuals that you've put in them have kind of played out. I've had real good luck with the alyssum that I actually planted from seeds early in the spring. It's still blooming, as are the snapdragons, and these have got buds on them now. I've been just taking off the old flowers, and they keep blooming and blooming. But I'm very pleased to say that the nurseries this year have seemed to realize that it can be a problem to have window boxes that need some filling, and they've come out with some smaller plants. There are some very small chrysanthemums and peppers and little cabbages and kales. This one is a colorful pepper. It's called a sangria, and I thought it was really an attractive addition to the window box. I'm not sure whether they're edible or not. They couldn't tell me, and the tag that is with it really doesn't say. They call it an ornamental pepper. Given that, I probably will not consume them. I've also gotten a few mums to put in, and if you do get mums, be sure to water them well. This one was a little dry this morning. And also I got a flowering cabbage, and this one will probably need to be watered underneath. And these are quite an attractive fall garden piece. Actually, they are edible, and they make a great garnish if you want to use the leaves on a plate. Some of the lower leaves can make a nice garnish on the plate, but they're perfectly edible, and you can use those for that. Other plants out here I'm looking at to see what I want to save and what is going to have to go with the frost. I've taken some cuttings of the geranium that's down here. I may or may not bring it in for a while. Depends on the space that I have. Most of the things in here I've taken cuttings. I've had to tie up this dahlia. It's tended to flop quite a bit, but I probably will save the bulb. Next year I won't plant it here. I'll plant it out where I can properly stake it. It was has a lovely pink flower, pink and white flower, and but it's just gotten a little too floppy. Once the frost has killed the top of the plant, we can dig the bulb and bring it in for the winter and plant it next spring and hopefully get some flowers. The other things, I have taken cuttings of many of them, and those can hopefully live over the winter and come back out here for next year, next spring. Now let's go back into the shade garden and pond area. I've continued to take care of the pond and feed my fish. Actually, they're asking for something right now. They all come running. They, over the season, learn. When someone stands here, a treat is coming, and they'll all swim right over very eagerly. We have a few frogs in the pond. They are amusing to watch. And now is the season that I want to decide what comes in and what stays out. Not everything can come inside for the winter. I try to concentrate on those plants that are hard to find or expensive to buy, and that would be my elephant ears. I've brought them, I usually bring them in and set them in a dishpan full of water and continue to water them some all winter. Unfortunately, they tend to die down fairly quickly, and my goal with those is to put them in back so they aren't too visible and keep them alive over the winter. There are some elephant ears that make a large bulb, and that bulb can be dug and saved. These stay as plants, and so you really need to take them into a sheltered location and just struggle to keep them mostly alive. By the time you get them back out in the spring, they take off and are huge again in no time, if you can keep them going for the winter. I lose one every once in a while. The ginger, I have some in a flower pot and also in the pot in the pond. I will bring one of those in, but not both. The impatiens, of course, I don't even bother to bring those in. I've taken the seeds from those that I'll use next year, and they would be very prone to white fly and all sorts of interesting bugs. So I don't bring them in. They will go as soon as the frost comes. They'll be gone. Storing flower pots is something that needs to be done, and any of the clay pots that I have that are no longer in use, inside will go into my shed for the winter. Plastic pots can stay outside, and I tend to put those in a large garbage can outdoors just to protect them from the snow and any breakage. But the clay pots need to be protected a little more than that. If a clay pot, especially if it's full of soil, freezes, water will get into the clay, it'll freeze, and the pot will crack. So if you have to be sure if you have large clay pots to protect them in some way. There are some clay pots, I believe, that are frost-proof or freeze-proof. I don't trust any of mine because they are not of that nature. They tend to be inexpensive, but nonetheless, I do bring them in and keep them under cover in the shed. The shed is unheated, but it still keeps them from getting water in them. So this one's drying out, then it will go in the shed. Some of the plants in this container I would like to try to save as well. There's a begonia, which will have a bulb that can be saved. The coleus, I can take cuttings. But this large begonia, I will dig and put in a pot and bring in and see if I can overwinter that as a house plant. I've seen house plants of this, and I think with the sun that I have from the south in my family room, that this will probably do quite well. A couple of plants that we have in bloom would be the grasses, and this grass is a grass that grows in the shade. Not many do. Most of them prefer full sun. This is a blue oat grass, and it has an interesting little bloom. This will dry and can be used in dried arrangements later on. It'll turn a nice buff color. And the other one that's in bloom, which may not be visible at this angle, is again the turtle head. And I have a turtle head in back that is pink, and I have a white one in this area. And I don't know if the camera can focus in on that one or not. This is a white turtle head, and the blooms look a little bit like a turtle head, if you have a good imagination. And this one is a white one. The pink one has spread into a group about this large. The white one probably will. This is its first year, and it seems to be doing pretty well in this location, which tends to be a little damp. It likes a damp, semi-shady spot. Now let's go in and do some cooking. It's football season. That means a lot of tailgate parties, or at least people coming over to watch the game on TV. We're football fans in this house. We attend some games and we watch a lot more of them. And that means having some food that's readily available, and a little snack food too. Today I'm going to use some of the things from the garden and make a few things that would be suitable for a tailgate party, or even one in your home. I'm starting out with some carrot-zucchini bars, which will be our dessert item. And in my bowl I have a half a cup of butter and 3 ounces of cream cheese. And to that I'm going to add 2/3 of a cup of brown sugar and mix that in. Really well. And then I want to add an egg, 1 egg. And again, mix it in. And now I'll add the dry ingredients, which is 1.5 cups of flour, just regular all-purpose flour. A teaspoon of baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Also, we want to add some vanilla, 1 teaspoon. We'll mix that in. Then I'll add 2/3 of a cup shredded carrots and 2/3 of a cup shredded zucchini. And the zucchini has been, after it's shredded, put in a strainer and kind of squeezed with a spoon to get the extra moisture out of it. It'll still have quite a bit. You see the batter right before I added it is quite thick. After I add it, not so thick. And we'll mix those in. And then add some white raisins, anywhere between 1/4 cup and 1/2 cup. I use the white ones. You can use regular raisins, or you can leave them out altogether. You could probably add nuts too. Get all the material off my beater. And I'll put this into a 9-inch square pan, and I've greased and floured the pan. When you flour the pan, give it a good tap to get the extra flour out so that you don't have a big glob of flour on the bottom. Shake a little in and then shake it out. It'll stick to the shortening, but you won't have a lot of flour on the bottom of your bars. I'm going to smooth this batter into the pan. And I'm going to spread it as evenly as I can. We're going to put that in the oven for 30 minutes at 350 degrees. Preheat our oven. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is some soup. And I'm going to make a sausage, sweet potato, and kale soup. This is nice for a nice brisk fall day. I'm going to use a tablespoon of olive oil, and I'll turn on my burner. And I'm going to add onion, large onion that's been chopped, and 2 cloves of garlic which have been minced. And we're going to let that cook along for a few minutes. And I've taken Italian sausage. I use sweet sausage. You could also use the hot sausage if you prefer hot sausage. And I've taken it out of the casings. It's still in kind of pieces, but the casings have been removed from it. And I'm going to add that into the pot as well. And we're going to let the sausage brown in the pot with the onions and the garlic. The sausage is browned. I've broken it up as we go into smaller pieces. The onion and garlic are also translucent. And now I'm going to add some other ingredients. I'm going to add about 1 pound of cut up sweet potatoes, peeled and cut up. I'm going to add 2 cups of water. And 4 cups of chicken broth. That happens to be a quart, which is what is in one of these containers. which is pretty convenient. Stir that around a little bit. I'm going to bring it to a boil. Sweet potatoes are raw. And then I will also add 3/4 of a cup of small pasta. The original recipe called for shells. I have these, which are called tubini, but there are other small soup pastas that you can use. We'll add that, and then we're going to just let it simmer away for a while we make a dip. We'll turn it down after it comes to a boil. The next thing I'm going to make is a hot corn dip. And right now I'm melting some butter in the pan. About 2 tablespoons of butter. When that's melted, we'll add a few other ingredients. I'm using fresh corn today, and this is corn that has not been cooked. It was cut off the cobs. You can also use canned or frozen corn. If you use canned corn, you need to drain it. Frozen corn you can just use right out of the freezer. It's going to take a little longer to cook from a frozen state. But I wanted 2 cups of corn. And again, fresh corn, frozen or canned can be used. I'm going to add that to the pan and try to keep it as hot as we can. We want to saute this until it gets a little brown. And once it starts cooking well, I'll add some onion and red pepper as well. The corn season is just about finished, so I'm using some of the last of the corn. It won't be around too much longer at the farm markets. I don't grow corn. I grow some decorative broom corn. Sometimes I grow Indian corn, but I've had such raccoon trouble if I try to grow sweet corn that I let the farmers in the area do it. There it's starting to cook. I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of onion and 1/4 a cup of chopped red bell pepper. The corn is starting to turn golden brown. We want it to be a little bit browned, and the onion and pepper to be translucent and pretty well cooked. This isn't going to get a whole lot more cooking, just a little reheating after this initial phase. So we want to make sure that it's done. And by browning the corn, you give it a little extra flavor. I'm going to add 2 green onions, which have been chopped, and 1 clove of garlic, and also some green chilies. And they can either be fresh or canned. I'm using about 1 tablespoon. You can add what you'd like. If you'd like it hotter, you can add more heat that way. And we'll let those cook just a few minutes. And I will add some salt and pepper. A few squeezes of pepper here. And just a little bit of salt. and maybe a pinch of cayenne pepper. This is pretty hot stuff, so you don't want too much of it, but I'll just give it a little pinch. Again, you could add some Tabasco later if you want it a little hotter. I'm going to take it off the heat. I'll add a quarter of a cup of cream cheese to this mixture, and also a half cup of cheddar and a half cup of grated jack cheese. And I'm using the packaged version. You can also use. So that comes out to 8 ounces of cheese. And I'm going to just mix this around well. Try to get everything mixed in good. The cheese will melt and add a little liquid to this. And I'm going to put it into a casserole dish. As neatly as I can here. Pick up any spare pieces. And then we're going to put this in the oven at 350 for about 10 minutes. You could probably keep it in a low oven even longer than that. Next thing I want to do is add the kale to the soup, which has been bubbling away. That's 4 cups of packed kale. And it looks like quite a lot of kale, and it is. But you'll find that it melts right into this soup as we stir it in. And that will take about 4 minutes too. Finish cooking. This makes a nice colorful fall soup. About 4 more minutes and it's finished. So you can see it's a fairly quick one to make as well. We have a few more minutes for the oven and then we'll be ready to serve our meal. In the meantime, I'm going to make up some frosting for the carrot zucchini bars. I'm going to add a little vanilla to 3 ounces of cream cheese, and then I'll be stirring in gradually a 1.5 cups of confectioner's sugar. Fix that. through the magic of television, we have some bars that need frosting. And I'll use the spatula to spread the frosting on the top of the carrot zucchini bars. Once I've put the cream cheese frosting on these, I will keep them in the refrigerator until they are served. They also freeze well, so you can make them ahead. And then they'll last for a while outside the refrigerator, but the frosting sets up a little better when it's cold. And we can cut those in some squares. Let's see there. Or bars. I guess we'll make some small bars with this one. Put a couple out this way so that you can see the colorful interior with the zucchini and the carrots. The raisins. Our soup is about ready to serve. We can get out something to put that in. Our kale's cooked, sweet potatoes and sausage are cooked as well. And you can see it looked like a lot of liquid, but once we get everything in there, not quite so much. Pour a little liquid over it. And we can serve that with a little grated Parmesan or other cheese. And we're going to get ready to get the dip out. And we'll be ready to serve that with some corn chips. And I chose the blue corn chips just because they added some color. And I thought that would be a good accompaniment to the corn dip. We'll put one on top with some on it. I do want to talk a little bit about preserving before we're finished. I've been busy canning, and if you are interested in canning, I would recommend getting a good guide. The blue book for canning is put out by Ball. They're the people that make the canning jars. It's a very good guide. It's got a lot of pictures, but it gives reputable information if you get a current copy of this book. It's called the Blue Book, and it's available at bookstores. It's available online at some of the farm stores, Agway, that sort of thing. So that's a good thing to get. I've been making tomato products, canned tomatoes, canned tomato sauce, and chili sauce, which is, I guess, talking to people in the Midwest or in the Northeast is more of a Midwest thing. It's a spicy sauce with cinnamon and other spices in it tomatoes, peppers, and onions that cooks quite a while to cook down. It's a good sauce with meat. It's not for making chili. It's for serving with meatloaf or hamburgers or anything like that. It's a relish, basically. The other thing that talk a little about is freezing. If you're really short on time, you can freeze tomatoes. And basically you want to wash them, core them, just take the cores out and put them in a plastic bag. These aren't going to be fresh tomatoes you can use in salad, but they are tomatoes that you can use to make sauce later on when you have no time or more time. And if you're short on time, just having these washed tomatoes in a plastic bag in the freezer, you can take them out and put them in the sauce, and they'll be just fine for that purpose. Peppers, again, you can cut the cores out, cut them in slices. You don't have to do anything to them in the way of processing or blanching. Just put them in a plastic bag in slices and stick them in the freezer. And you can use them in cooked dishes in the winter. Again, they will not be such that you can slice them. They become limp, but they do work in something that's cooked. I like to use a freezer bag and then use a wax pencil, China marking pencil, to put what it is, so you don't have any UFOs or unknown frozen objects, and then the date. So I just put 15 on it, so I knew I put them in there in the year 15, garden season. So that's just a little bit about some of the canning and freezing methods. And canning is a great way to preserve things. It's a lot of fun to do. I'm currently teaching my daughter-in-law how to do it, and she's enjoyed learning how. She's done tomatoes and peaches and apples this year, and looks forward to doing more. And there we are. We have our little tailgate dinner or lunch or halftime repast. And we will see you next time. I'm Liz Davey. This has been A Walk in the Garden on NCTV.